puppy fat and Kat's towering height and thick specs, they'd stood out in Cardiff High for all the wrong reasons. Then, when Mikey had turned up from a rough estate in Llanedin with long black hair in year 9, he'd had no other choice but to join their gang. Now, though, Kat wasn't the square in glasses anymore. She had contact lenses, a thigh gap, perky boobs and glossy Angelina Jolie hair, as well as a first-class degree and a career in banking waiting for her when they got back. With her pale podge, strawberry blonde hair, a tutu and that clueless gawp if asked what she was going to do for a job, Vicky was still hoping to have a ta-da moment of transformation. Whenever Vicky admired her friend's new looks, Kat would make sure she returned the compliment. Kat knew what it was like to feel unattractive. But that didn't change the fact that Vicky was going to spend the next 6 months in Kat's shadow. If only Mikey was coming, he always made her feel special. Sort of interesting, funny, clever, kind. And not the big idiot she considered herself to be. Oh, God, she thought, shutting her eyes. She was going to miss him madly. He was her constant, her ally and her teammate. Even more so than Kat, who'd been put in a different form and was whisked off at home time to her smart semi overlooking the park for after-school tuition, leaving Vicky and Mikey to deal with the bullies alone. He'd been moved by his mum and dad from the interfering Catholic school at a time when she was having one of what Mikey called her mad attacks. With drainpipe school trousers and both ears pierced, he stood out a mile, and from day one he was a puff and a queer. A mouse of a student who, at best, was called a plodder, Vicky had no hope. Hanging out with him meant she was tainted by association. When everyone else had been sorting themselves into their tribes, whether they were indie kids or trendies, she and him had been on the periphery, united by not being like anyone else. They paired up because no one would sit next to them. That was when they bonded over their pencil cases scrawled with pulp and the Manic Street Preachers, class war, and their hatred of Tony Tory Blair. Being singled out as weird, they took it and turned it on its head, thriving on their otherness. There was comfort in their in-jokes, secret codes, latest activist causes, and understanding that they were different. Kat, or Catherine back then, flitted in and out of their world when she had a second away from her heavily scheduled free time of music and maths. Everyone else followed the crowd. The girls all had Rachel from Friends haircuts, while the boys tried to look like Baywatch extras with blonde highlights. These clones had no hope. Mikey and Vicky, however, were destined to make it, whatever it was. Vicky would listen enraptured, her heart beating wildly, as Mikey talked of the future, desperate to get away from his drunk of a dad, how he'd tread the roofs of the identical new-build estates like stepping stones, and pick his way to London, paving the way for a better life. The others, he'd scoffed, could only see as far as 10 minutes up the A48. Vicky didn't have the same motivation, and like Mikey, her family were boringly normal. The weekly shop was always done on a Wednesday. Dad drove an executive Ford. Mum dreamed of having a side return extension to their Victorian terrace round the corner from Roath Park. And her big brother Gavin was scaling the grades in the finance department of the National Assembly for Wales. But that was precisely why Vicky yearned to fly. Because she was so ordinary. She had an emotional need to make herself stand out, be accepted, be someone, to be interesting. Disappointingly, Reading Uni hadn't done that for her. Mikey was supposed to have gone with her. She was going to do sociology while he did computer science. Kat, of course, was going to Oxford. But he'd spectacularly failed his A-levels after yet another bout of trouble at home. And as soon as she left home, he started working 9 to 5 at the phone shop. It was a horrible first in Vicky's life.